Morning, everyone. So we're going to be speaking about the hiring for startups, right? So that's the topic. And hiring in general is hard, right? And hiring for startups even harder. And hiring for startups in China, I think even harder, right? And if you try to do that, probably you see the pain. And the reason why it's hard because, well, startup means uncertainty. Startup means something that's not really stable, right? And if you are trying to get someone on board and say, hey, we are going to be unicorn next year, so probably you need to put a decent amount of efforts to convince people to do that, right? I know some couple of cases here in China, when founders basically were going to families and talking to parents and say, hey, don't worry about your kid, it's going to be all cool, it's going to be all right. So they basically taking this approach, talking to parents and to make sure that parents are okay with that, right? I think that somehow connected to the culture, right? Chinese people, they're very entrepreneurial, but the ones who are not running businesses, they prefer to work for the bigger, stable corporates. And that means it's going to be, way harder for startups to get great talents on board. So before we speak about hiring, right? So that's going to be four points that we want to highlight today. So the first one was going to be about the channels that usually people use here in China to hire people. Then we have, of course, differences between hiring local people or foreigners. We will also touch Chinese returnees, which is kind of very trendy and interesting area to look at. And the last one, do you want to hire people in tier one cities, big cities like Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and now you have actually new tier one cities with way more cities joining versus second tier cities or even third tier cities. So those are the 4 points we're going to touch. We have only 40 minutes for this session. I will be speaking around up to 30 minutes, and then we allow 10 minutes for Q&A. So please, if you have any question, just pencil it down, write it down, and then during the Q&A, we can discuss it, all right? So before we talk about the hiring, I think you also want to know why actually I'm talking about the hiring, right? So as Kaha mentioned, thank you, that we have the platform weHustle, and we work with early stage startups mostly. We have 3 directions that we are focusing on. So one of the direction is we do lots of events, and we organize events and we support many other events. But all of these events are somehow related to startups, somehow related to innovation and technology and in entrepreneurship in general. So by putting events all the time, we connect people, right? So that's one of the goals, to encourage entrepreneurship and innovation in China through connecting. And events, this is the perfect way how you connect people. And the second direction that we have is actually job board. We didn't have a plan in the beginning to have a job board, but it just happened because once you start working with startups, then you realize that actually they have a big challenge to hire people, and where to find right candidates, it's also challenging. But since we have the audience who by default already interested in events, so events are the filter for the audience. Once you're going to the pitch competition, it means you are interested in startups. It means you have a higher chances to be hired by these startups, right? If you go to innovation related event, again, you are more curious about what's going on, what's next. So probably you are likely to be joining startup at some point or starting your own. So events allow us to filter people, and those people are a good target audience for startups to hire. All right. So mostly we focus, like I said, on technology, innovation, entrepreneurship, and people that we can find usually is project managers, marketing guys, business developers, salespeople. You can see on the screen. I'm not going to list them, but it gives you the idea what crowds we are dealing with on a daily basis, and that's pretty much going to define as well what I'm going to talk about in this PPT. So those are the couple of companies, group feedbacks from customers, some clients. So mostly those are the startups or corporates, which has the innovation arm, and they're looking more for entrepreneurial people. All right, so the first big thing, channels, right? Let's dive right into the channels and let's discuss what are the ways people are looking for candidates in China. All right, so the first one, the easiest one and the most straightforward one is basically you just go to the platforms. I'm just give you a few examples. There are of course way more platforms in China you can find online, Baidu or Google for it. So if you're looking for candidates who are more local, then probably you'll go to some big platforms like Boss, Liepin, Lago, right? 51 Jobs. So those are big platforms. They have apps, of course, and you can list your JD over there. Some of them free, some of them you need to pay, but it's not that expensive. Okay. And on the right side, I'll give you a few examples. May plug, of course, weHustle is there. So LinkedIn is still very important platform if you are trying to look for international people, right? Or for Chinese who studied abroad or work abroad, or maybe work for the international company. So they speak English, they know about LinkedIn, and they will be on LinkedIn, right? So if you're looking for a purely local people, probably LinkedIn is not that much helpful, but still don't ignore LinkedIn. It's a great place to use in China as well. And it's actually growing in China, right? So if you're looking for something like smaller platforms, you can go to China Cities and China Jobs Daily. And again, plenty more of them. This is not the recommendation. This is just examples, all right? To look at many of them, very affordable and easy to use. Some of them probably don't have Chinese interface, then probably you'll find a Chinese partner who can help you to create JD and to post over there, right? So this is the one about the job boards and job platforms in China. So the second one, which is I think for startups works very well. This is actually offline activities, offline events. That's where you meet lots of people, right? But again, not just an event. So it's industry focused events. If you are in AI and there are AI conference, then you're gonna meet hundreds of people who are in this industry, who are interested by default in this topic, and going there and meeting people in person. It is time consuming, right? But for startups, I guess since you have the challenge to hire right people, you need to put extra effort to find a good team, right? There are plenty of events happening in Shanghai, Beijing, Shenzhen, Guangzhou, and other cities. Just build a list of events that you want to attend and put some efforts going there. Why events also good? Because again, in China, I think it's more connected to the culture. The personal connections, in-person connections are extremely, extremely important. Um, People love to meet, people love to network. All deals are done through handshakes and of course the meetings and in tea houses and restaurants, lunches. So people who are in China, they know that building up network, which is called 𝐿 very important. And by attending those events, you can meet more people and then you can help your startup to find better talents, right? Job fairs, again, straightforward thing, plenty of them. Some of them, I didn't put the names over here, but for example, from lewagon, if you're looking for more digital talents, Innovate is doing the same thing. They do the future talents in digital talents from time to time, right? Lots of universities also check the schedule. They have job fairs happening, so you can tap into the pool of the university students if you're looking for. Then, for example, China Accelerator, they also do twice a year job fairs, focusing more on technical people, right? And also helping their startups to hire. Check also funds, investment funds, incubators, accelerators. They also trying to help to hire for their portfolios. So they also organize job fairs. That is again time consuming, but very, very helpful because you meet people in person, which is very important, right? Startup events, again, pitch competitions, conferences, workshops. Again, maybe you have some people who are easygoing and outgoing, just send them to meet as many people as possible, right? And of course, in general, networking events going to be helpful. So this is the big part, and that's we talked to many teams, and many of them say we met our co-founder, or we met this employee, or we met this team member at the event, at the conference, at the workshop. Again, because it's way easier to filter people by topics, by interest. Next one, I think it's supposed to be online platform, but I think we need to make it a separate slide. WeChat groups are somehow crazy, and it's growing. There are plenty. I just give you the screenshot on the left. You can see I have more like 30 or 40 groups, right? Just ask your friends who are already in job groups, add you, get as many groups as possible. There are some groups more general. Probably you don't want to be there because then you're going to be seeing lots of information that is not relevant, and probably people are also not very targeted in the groups. But there are some groups with the specific focus. Like, for example, here you can see the data gigs jobs, and then everything related to data is there. So there are lots of like marketing groups and BD and sales. So try to find those groups, and then in those groups people just share JDs or PDF files or any information. So one thing that I don't like about the WeChat groups, it's very efficient, it's very easy. But then when you share information, then lots of people are adding you, right? Probably you don't want that, because sometimes you just reshare and then people add you. They don't actually read much through the JD, to just add and want to talk to you directly. So it might be a little bit overwhelming. Plus, when you post information over there, you expose your contact information publicly as well. So probably you're going to be expecting lots of spam coming in shortly after that. So be careful, but that is actually very helpful as well. So WeChat groups, big thing. Try to just invest and spend time on this, okay? Those expert packages, in those years already kind of gone. So now more and more foreigners, if they're coming, they can't come in on their own. It means they don't have any packages, so they need to find a job, they need to pay their own bills. If they they need to have the visa, they need to pay for the apartment and everything. So with that being said, it's going actually harder to find the local foreigners, because unless you pay a lot so they can cover all the expenses, all the costs they have here in China, they're not going to be willing to work for the startup. Or if they have probably already stable job and they have some time, they're willing to invest and also develop the project together with you, then yes. But from scratch, for the startup, hiring a foreigner would be a challenge, right? It's just too much risk as well involved for them, because you need to do all the paperwork, issue the visas, right? So this is kind of consideration that you need to always think about. And also, I think it's very important to answer, why do you want to hire foreigner, right, versus local? So this is very important. Unless you have a very specific task for the foreigners that local people cannot carry, then probably it makes sense to hire. If no, then it's just easier to go with the local person, right? And another thing which is also kind of interesting, here's there's some stats, right? China just did the population census in 2020, right? You can see here that we have less than a million foreigners in China, right? So this is 8,045,000. And then you have 300, almost 400,000 people from Hong Kong, and then 55 Macau and Taiwan. So the population of foreigners is very small. So it means you're pretty much trying to find someone who is rare in China. And then probably also that's going to be helpful. Another table, you can see how many foreigners. So this table gives you the cities and provinces, right? Population, and that means including foreigners, people from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan. Okay, so Guangdong is actually kind of a big pool of talents, foreign talents, right? And then Yunnan, surprisingly, and then Shanghai is only on the third place. And if you look at Beijing, it's only 62,000, right? This is very small group, right? So that's why if you want to find foreigners, probably you're gonna have a hard time. And then this 0.1, that's how many foreigners are in China, right? This is kind of very interesting, right? So that's why probably it's not very related, but if your business is targeting foreign market, then it's just 0.1% of the whole market that you are going to target, right? So that's why, again, just try to answer the question, why do you need a foreigner? If you don't need, then probably, it's going to be just way easier to go with the local person, because you have way more options, right? And it's easier in many ways. But of course, there are lots of jobs that still need to be done by foreigners, and then you have no options, you need to find them, right? So this one is about local versus foreigners. Probably it's not the best news for foreigners, right? But that's the reality, right? China is growing fast, and that happened to many other countries. So the job market is changing, and it's a natural thing. So another one, which is actually to continue the topic about the international talents and local talents, this is Chinese returnees, right? And people call them 𝐭𝐴𝐺, right, or sea turtle. So those are people who studied abroad and now coming back to China, all right? And it's very interesting to look actually how many people studied back in 2009 abroad, local people from China. And then you have stats for 2018, which is over 500,000, right? 662,000 Chinese studied abroad. So you can see that it's growing, and it will keep growing more and more. I mean, 2021 is exception because of the COVID, right? But the number of people who study abroad from China is actually growing year by year. And here's very interesting thing that, like I said, over 500,000 Chinese students study in other countries in 2017, right? And almost 500,000 here, 480 of them come back. So before, when they were studying abroad, they stayed abroad, but now they're coming back, right? Because China offers way more opportunities. So more and more Chinese educated abroad coming back. And then of course, they are very competitive, right? So they're very good position because they're local, they speak English, French, or Italian, or it doesn't matter what language. They've been abroad, they understand the Western culture much better, and they're coming back, and they're Chinese, right? So they're very competitive, and lots of tech companies, lots of startups, they are targeting these people, right? And you can find them on LinkedIn, right? So if you're looking for these kind of people, international Chinese, then you can find them on LinkedIn because they have all the university degrees, and they some experience, also internships outside of China. When they're coming back, you can look for them, right? And many of them actually have the master degrees and higher. So that's actually what's going on. This 𝐭𝐴𝐺 is growing, and they are very attractive candidates for many companies, especially now when you have a big trend that China tech is also trying to go global and to expand to other countries. When they go global, they need people who are way more international, and they of course will be engaging foreigners and Chinese who speak English or Spanish or French. All right, and I think we have around few minutes to finish up and to open up for the Q&A, right? So let's dive into the last part, which is tier 1, tier 2 cities. You know that in China you have all the tier 1, which is Shenzhen, Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou. Now you have tier 1 new cities, I think up to 15 cities over there, including Nanjing and Shenzhen and Chengdu. And then you have like tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. I don't think you want to go like very deep, because probably you don't find right talents over there. But if you're considering where you want to hire people, where you want to start actually your business in tier 1 and tier 2, then there are some pros and cons. Before we look at the pros and cons, I also want to pay attention to the universities, right? Because universities, if you have plenty of universities around, that means you have always a big pool of talents, right? And again, you have this big question: why do you want to be in Shanghai? Why do you want to be in Beijing? Why do you want to be in Chengdu? Right. So this is very important to understand. But here I also found some interesting data. I'm not sure if it's 100% accurate, but that gives definitely a very good picture of how many universities and colleges in that on other city, right? So Beijing, of course, is home to biggest number of universities. That's why you have area like Beida and where located. So there are plenty of universities around, but there are many other places as well. So then you have higher chances to get good talents because you have always a new supply of talents, right? Then Wuhan is very big also in terms of universities, Guangzhou, Chongqing, and surprisingly Shanghai, right? It's actually is not that high in the list. And then like Chengdu, Tianjin, Changsha. So just look what kind of universities you have. If you need more technical people, probably, that's going to be this city. If you are looking for manufacturing, let's say, it's going to be that city based on the industry. But, being close to the universities is always good in terms of getting talents, right? And then very quickly about the pros. So if you're moving to the smaller cities, right, definitely the pay is lower, so it's more affordable to have people, right, on board. Then also kind of very important to mention in China that in the smaller cities you have more support from the local government. Some cities, they even gonna pay like 20 or 30% of your first employee, 2 or 3. So they have different policies. They're willing to attract more people, so probably you'll have more support as well, which is very important for the startup to have in the beginning, right? And if you have a development team of people doing the mini programs or building your website, doesn't matter if they're sitting in Shanghai, Beijing, or they're sitting in Chengdu or Chongqing. It doesn't matter, right? But you will have paying lower cost for the rent, salaries, and you have more support from the government. Again, you need to answer why do you need. If you need to be team physically in a big city, then you have no other options. But if it's not required, then probably it makes sense to look into the smaller cities. And of course, the environment in those places less competitive, right? So less pressure, so it's easier to find candidates. If you look at the cons, right? Of course, it's going to be harder to get a top talent. Again, because top talents, they're trying to be in the bigger companies, bigger cities, so they probably will be leaving those second and third tier cities, moving to big places because they know they will have a better salary. So probably the top talent is going to be in more hard, challenging to find in those places. Those places, again, if you're looking for more international environment, this is not the best place to find international people in the small places. And of course, probably the channels, like the pitch competitions or conferences, not going to be helpful in those places as well. You need to look for the local resources and local channels to access the candidates. All right. So that's quick in a nutshell what I wanted to share. And we have, I believe, 8 minutes for the Q&A before we call it a day. All right. So I'm happy to try to answer your questions.
Hey guys, you can write the questions in the chat box or you can raise the hand and we will unmute you for a question. Okay, here's the first question from Victoria Ku.
Just clap my hands. Thank you, Marianne, for sharing. It was very inspiring. A quick question. What do you think in terms of the trends right now from hiring foreigners, from the Chinese companies hiring foreign talents comparing to before pandemic and right now? How do you see that there's difference of people preferring to hire more foreigners or versus preferring not to hire foreigners at all since there are less people in China? Thank you.
Sure. Well, that's interesting what's going on at the moment, right? But I think even if they want to hire, they still can't because people cannot enter, or it's extremely hard. But again, what we see as well on the job board, lots of companies, local companies, agencies here, they're posting JDs all in English, but then they say the Chinese local, right, or Chinese native. So they are trying to find people with the international background, and that's what I thought the returnees are the best fit for them. So it's unless you really need to have a foreigner team, you don't need, right, because foreigners again, it's more complicated to deal with the paper first thing, right? And I think that the paperwork is still kind of manageable, but even for our team, it's great to have bilingual in the team, right? So it's never an issue to write an article or to reply to the client, or to make a call, or to run the meeting either in English or in Chinese. So unless you're the foreigner which is fluent in Chinese, then probably again it will be easier for you to find job. But for companies, again, why do you need foreigner? If there is no specific reason, they will not, right? And now, of course, lots of foreigners, because of the pandemic, unfortunately left China. And the ones who left, I'm not sure they will be back, because after such a long time, probably their connections already kind of lost. So I think the opportunities for foreigners, of course, still there, but they are kind of shrinking. So another area that I already pointed out, that China tech is going global. So the tech companies, they're trying to expand to the overseas markets. And that's where actually foreigners can more contribute and help, right? Because they have the expertise and they have the connections back to their countries. So those areas are still very interesting for foreigners and for companies who are looking for foreigners.
Thank you. Next question we'll give to Anthony. Please, Anthony.
Yeah, hey, Marian, thanks so much for sharing these insights. So basically, we work with some of these international universities to kind of like help in transitioning their Chinese students into the working environment in China. But there is something interesting we have noticed. We do a bit of branding of these companies, and they look very attractive to the high-grades or the students. But then when they go into the interview, the companies lose them a lot of the times. What would be your advice to startups when it comes to positioning themselves to kind of like attract these returnees? Thank you.
Well, that's going to be pretty much for all companies, right, here in China and outside of China. So to attract great candidates, so you need to have a great project. If the talents see that there is actually a good team, and you have interesting project, and this project actually is growing, so people always will be happy to work with, right? If it's something not very appealing or interesting, then probably it's going to be harder. So just again, that's what it takes, the in-person meetings, right? I think again, when we see startups are hiring and they're happy about the candidates, that's because they meet them through different events in different environments, right? So the in-person connection is very important. So if you have that, and you're open and you're willing to get a great team on board, so they will come. But of course, it's the ones, again, the ones who are not not following after the interview, right? Because they just not really interested in working in the startup. So there are lots of people come and say, hey, I'm looking for a job and it looks interesting. But once you start talking about, hey, we are a startup and we are growing and we are a small team, then they just drop off, right? So they're just not interested. So this is kind of the just it's not good, it's not bad, it's just not the right type of people. So when you meet right type of people, they already by default understand, okay, startup is not stable, right? Startup is uncertain, so they might not to have this attitude, right? So just try to find the pool of the right-minded people, and then it will be easier to convince them to jump on board.
All right, we have time for one last question. So if everyone wants to raise a hand and ask a question, it's the time. Okay, we actually have some questions in the question box. You can see that, Marian.
Yeah. Next to a good salary, what are the ways to attract Chinese talent for international startup base in China, right? So, I mean, salary is very important, right? The team is extremely important as well. So, and again, lots of people, for example, like in Shanghai and Beijing, they're very spoiled. For Shanghai people, their location is very important as well. If your office in a good place, then they will probably join, especially very local people, right? If it's somewhere far, they might be like, not really. I'm not sure about the Beijing situation, but the team, of course, is all the time is a great thing. And then the working hours, because you know that in China, especially for local tech companies, it's very normal to have this 996, right? When people work from 9 to 9, 6 days a week. And now it's another big trend, which is Lin Qi, right? 007, actually 24/7 hours. So this is crazy, right? So many people, they prefer to work for the foreign companies or for the MNC, multinational companies, just because they know that the working hours, they're way more standard, right? So they will go for the companies that have better schedule than just go for crazy 996 schedules, right? So those things are also very important to take into consideration, right? So I'm entrepreneur, owner, and director of 2 startups in Shanghai. I have had little trouble hiring foreign personnel in China, and the vast network and hiring channels. Surprisingly, however, I have a struggle really a lot when I have tried to find the local talents. I tried, people always led me to the Chinese apps, but they are in a bit difficult to use for foreigners who don't master the Chinese language. Plus, they are full of high fees and salespeople. So yeah, the Chinese apps might do that things, right? So that's why you need to have a Chinese colleague who basically will go manage these apps. It can be overwhelming. That's why what I'm saying, so this is the one of the channels. But then again, if you go to the Chinese apps, you might receive 100 of candidates, right? You might receive 100 of CVs, but then if you try to screen them, you will see that most of them are not really relevant. So it's gonna be wasting of time. That's why I try to again ask your local friend to. There are different apps with the specific focus on industries, right? And those going to be a little bit more niche and helpful. So you will have more targeted people. And then again, networking is extremely important, where you can meet people in person, okay? All right. So just if you have more questions, since we don't have time, please send me the email or find me on LinkedIn, or here's, I think, my WeChat as well. So I'm happy to talk later and give some feedback and advice and comments as much as I can.